A search is underway after a U.S. military aircraft with 6 people on board crashed off the coast of Japan.
Japanese fishermen found 3 of the crew members.
One of the engines looked like it was on fire.
This is possibly the final day of the tentative truce between Israel and Hamas.
The 6th set of hostages are expected to be released.
But more than 140 Israeli hostages remain in Gaza.
It's been 54 days. 54 days.
As DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is heading to Texas today.
Couldn't come at a more critical time because the holiday week did nothing to slow the surge.
The law that Mayorkas wants is an accelerant to every single aspect of the border calamity.
A young Kansas City Chiefs fan getting wrongly smeared as a racist wearing blackface. An article in Deadspin only showed this photo of the boy and did not show the other half of his face.
Unbelievable that they take shots at a kid this age.
Well, the White House's 40-foot national Christmas tree took a little bit of a tumble.
This political cartoon shows Bidenomics dragging down the U.S. economy.
It's the definition of symbolism. A president literally falling down just like that massive Christmas tree.
All right. We begin the final hour of Fox and Friends for this Wednesday with a Fox News alert. Right now, at this hour, a search is underway after a military aircraft, U.S. military, has crashed off the coast of Japan overnight our time.
All right, the Japanese Coast Guard says 6 crew members were on board, 1 was killed.
And Griff Jenkins is live in Washington with the latest for us. Griff?
Yeah, good morning, guys. Interesting. It's after 8 a.m. now, and U.S. officials have yet to comment or confirm the crash. But Japanese officials have been speaking out, holding a news conference overseas, saying this chopper disappeared sometime after 2 p.m. local time, and that a U.S. military tilt-rotor V-22 Osprey crashed in the ocean near Japan overnight. Take a look at these images here. Japan's Coast Guard conducting a search and rescue operation after finding a debris field of wreckage from an Osprey believed to be carrying at least 6 people, crashing south of Japan about 2 miles from Yakushima Island. There were multiple fishing boats in the area. Local fishermen say they found some of the crew members whose condition is unknown, but Japan's Coast Guard says that 1 has been confirmed dead. Now, this comes after a string of deadly Osprey crashes just 3 months ago. This past August, 3 U.S. Marines killed and several wounded during training in Australia. Now, in June of 2022, 5 U.S. Marines were killed during a training mission in California. And in March of 2022, 4 U.S. Marines killed during a large NATO military exercise in Norway. In fact, Fox News has gone back and looked and confirmed since 2012, there have been at least 6 fatal crashes, killing 19. And there have been recent issues with the Ospreys carrying the press while accompanying the president. Back on November 1st in Minnesota, an Osprey carrying the press to a family farm in Northfield. The press pool reported hearing a loud bang, saw smoke, so they were forced to land and board another aircraft and made the journey safely. But again, we are waiting for U.S. military officials to comment and also ultimately, guys, to learn what led or caused this Osprey crash because of mechanical errors that have apparently occurred recently. In fact, this past year, there was a temporary grounding of Ospreys in Japan. Hopefully, we'll learn more as news comes in and people wake up over at the Pentagon. Guys, we'll send it back to you.
Griff, it's had a spotty safety record for a very long time. Is it just the design of the aircraft?
Well, we don't know what happened to this Osprey in this incident, but you're right, Steve. A lot of people have talked about this thing, and I'm not a helicopter pilot, called the hard clutch issue, which apparently causes the aircraft to lose thrust capability. And we've seen multiple incidences here, deadly ones, unfortunately, 6 since 2012. And that's why Japanese officials are already speaking out about this. They had temporarily grounded their Osprey fleet because they have a parallel accompanying flight because we trained together many times. They temporarily had to ground them in the last year because of a U.S. Osprey mechanical failure. So it'll be interesting to learn what has happened here. Tragically, though, the headline here, Japanese officials confirming at least 1 crew member aboard that U.S. Osprey has been confirmed dead.
But Griff, the benefit of the Osprey, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, they can land on aircraft carrier pretty quickly because they just shoot up vertically like a helicopter, but then they can go fast like a plane.
That's right. That tilt rotor motor is what makes it so versatile, Ainsley. And I remember when they retired the CH-46s, it had a fixed wing dual rotors that Ollie North and I were embedded on during the invasion of Iraq in 2003. They quickly replaced those shortly thereafter with these Osprey, saying they can do anything and operate in a very narrow, confined space, and of course on ships as well. But mechanical errors continues to be a story that plagues this fleet.
Got to get this under control.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Griff. We
These are our
appreciate
soldiers,
it.
our
Yeah,
men
they
and
deserve
women.
better.
Yeah.
All right, to another Fox News alert. Smoke rising in Gaza as we're now in what could be the final day of a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas.
A sixth set of hostages are expected to be released today. They're going to join the 60-plus who have been freed so far.
Meanwhile, the White House hoping Americans will be included in this batch after none were released in yesterday's exchange.
All right, Greg Palkot, Tel Aviv. Hey, Greg.
Hey, folks. Yeah, we are in Tel Aviv. We're at various hospitals in this area. Those released hostages are being treated after their horrible treatment by the hands of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. 12 hostages were freed overnight. These former captives telling horror stories for weeks. There was little food and light, difficult sleeping and sanitary conditions. One young man told of beatings and being forced to watch torture videos. All told, some 60 Israeli women and children, plus others, have been released. It's believed another 160 remain held by Hamas and other groups. Among them, 10-month-old Kafir Bibas and other family members. A relative told you folks earlier the Israeli government says they won't be released today.
We try to remain hopeful. We continue with our battle and efforts as a family, as a united family, to try and get some answers.
Strong stuff. As part of the deal, Palestinian prisoners are also being released. What's being worked on right now by the U.S., Israel, and Hamas go-betweens, an extension of the ceasefire and hostage exchange. That's all set to end overnight. Crucial, too, in these days, humanitarian aid being brought into the battered Gaza Strip. With most of the fighting on pause now, it's a chance to reach people there amid the death and destruction. Again, the reason reported that little baby Kafir and his family might not be released easily, they are being held, it is said, by another militant group in Gaza. That just shows how complicated the situation is, why diplomats at this very moment are fighting for more time before full-scale fighting could resume in Gaza. Back to you.
All right,
thanks, Greg.
3:07 in the afternoon, not too much more time until we see who's on the list and who's actually released.
Well, if you've been following what's been happening on campus and the whole diversity and equity and inclusion
You've gone to a lot of these.
Been out there talking with the folks. They've been talking about equity and inclusion. Well, except for if you're a Jewish student. And we've been seeing it at all of these Ivy Leagues. Harvard University now is facing federal civil rights investigations right now for their anti-Semitism while this Israel and Hamas war
for not doing anything about it.
Nothing about it.
Yeah, and you're looking at one of the demonstrations in October, and apparently this is based on the fact that, and we told you about this, a first-year Israeli student at the Harvard Business School reportedly was shoved and accosted by pro-Palestinian protesters at a die-in. It looks like that's the die-in right there. At Harvard in October. The FBI and Harvard police received a complaint that said the Israeli student had his phone ripped from his hands and was assaulted physically and verbally, and so that is part of that earlier complaint. Now it looks like the federal government's getting involved.
So the Office for Civil Rights is saying they're not accusing Harvard, they're just investigating because they have received these complaints. And so now they're looking into it.
So, you know, what's interesting in the Wall Street Journal, they say, hey, in fairness, Harvard is no worse than the other universities. Then again, that's a scandal. It ought to be. Today, the place they're supposed to be the exemplars of how a civilized community behaves have become prone to loutish behavior as well as incoherent in their responses. I mean, we're going to get to the point where if you're from an Ivy League, you probably don't want to put it on your resume.
It's true.
Because you don't know who's sitting across from you is going to say, are you part of those lunatics that stood against the government, the Democratic administration, who stood up against October 7th?
Well, the problem is that these same institutions were the same people telling us for years of how to behave. who to hire, what standards should be there, what to do, check your privilege, every single thing. They gave us a guideline of how to treat religious minorities and just minorities in general.
Right.
And it looks like they don't see the Jewish people as minorities, despite all the hate crime, the majority of the hate crime being targeted toward them.
Their donors do. Right. The donors are standing up saying, okay, I'm going to close my checkbook now.
So now there's going to be a federal civil rights investigation, and the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and UPenn are scheduled to be called on the carpet. They're going to testify before Congress. Republican Congresswoman Victoria Fox chairs that committee, and she is vowing to hold university leaders accountable for anti-Semitism. So we don't know what's going to happen with the federal investigation, but it's going to be out in the public next week on Capitol Hill.
Well, freedom of speech is different than violence.
That's
and what's happening, this young man who's accusing Harvard of not doing anything about his situation being shoved.
That's caught on video, by the way, too.
Yeah.
So another thing, I'm somewhat of an expert on this. And if people are in Washington working for the federal government, you might want to listen to me now.
Yeah.
So if you buy a Christmas tree, you get yourself a stand.
This is the topic. New topic you're the expert on.
New topic. Okay. So if you have a Christmas...
like the last topic.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I should have taken a bigger breath. I should have said, how about this? Next time I'll go, well,
because we were talking about a federal investigation.
Yeah.
You go, well, I'm an expert at this. It's like, wait, what happened to Brian?
I should have asked for a swoosh. I need a swoosh button.
You needed a transition.
Right. So if you have a Christmas tree, get yourself a traditional holder. You get the Christmas tree, you jam it into the prongs.
Why are you an expert on this? Did your Christmas tree fall over at one point?
No,
last night?
I'm building to a story. You're gonna love it.
All right.
And then you put the screws like Uncle Fester on his head, and you make sure it's equal, and you stand that tree up, and you should be able to walk out of that room and know it won't fall down. Sadly, no one listened to me yesterday. Down goes the Fraser fir.
Well, okay, Brian. I don't know that you've read all the details about the National Christmas Tree, which blew over in a
Don't make excuses
yesterday.
for him, Steve.
Well, here's the thing. They didn't put it in a stand. They planted it.
That's a big problem.
That's the problem.
They
don't listen to me.
They don't listen to Brian.
On the ellipse, just south of the White House, what they have done since the 70s is they have been planting Christmas trees there.
Big mistake.
And they stay there year-round. This tree was planted 2 weeks ago to replace another one. And here's the thing. They planted it, apparently securely, and they were holding it down with guy wires, and yet a 45-mile-an-hour wind came over and just blew that tree down.
Thanks,
the House
Janice
Judiciary GOP says, they tweeted this out, National Christmas Tree falls down, perfectly summing up Joe Biden's presidency.
I love it. I love it. It's a perfect explanation of what's happening in the country. I mean, we're just falling over. Gas prices, inflation, when you go to the grocery store, the borders
Bidenomics is working.
Crime all over the place. We got freaking racists just marching in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the country.
By the way, they're going to try to do that at the Rockefeller Plaza when they light up the tree tonight.
Yeah.
These Palestinians, these pro-Palestinian Hamas people. But here's the thing. The resiliency of this nation. To have a crane to pick up a tree, just because they didn't listen to me doesn't mean I don't want them to stand it up.
Right.
And by the way, when you plant a tree, make sure you get your foot and push down right around the roots with your foot,
Brian,
just like you do mums in the fall.
Look how big this tree is.
Yeah.
You can't just stomp on the ground. And
It's 40 feet.
If you know what you're doing, you can.
They had National Park Service rangers stamp it on the ground. And so what happened yesterday in our nation's capital answers the question. If a tree falls in Washington, does anybody hear it? And the answer is, we've been talking about it for the last 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
On somebody. All right, so y'all, tomorrow is the big day. We've been waiting on it for months now because Sean Hannity was interviewing Gavin Newsom. He said, would you debate Ron DeSantis? And he said, yeah, 3 hours, 4 hours, give me whatever you want. And then he asked DeSantis, and
it's going to be great.
DeSantis said, yeah, I'll debate him. So this has been in the works for a while. Finally, they secured a date. It's tomorrow night.
So what are the stakes? Mark Penn, an expert in the area, does this for a living, says, hey, big upside and big downside. Watch.
I think this is a high-risk event for everybody involved. I think Ron DeSantis expected to be much higher in the presidential race against Donald Trump. So this has now turned into something that might have been risky, where he has everything to lose, where maybe if he pulls off a great debate here and defends his record, he'll actually come up a few points in the presidential race. Newsom, he doesn't have much to lose here. He's not expecting to get Fox voters to vote for him no matter what. On the other hand, if he can slay Ron DeSantis, that's going to put him in a great position in the presidential bullpen, which is really what he's interested in getting.
I agree with everything Mark said except for the downside for Gavin Newsom. If he looks bad and can't defend his state and all his policies that are so great and the green tech, all the green things that he says into an echo chamber because no one pushes back, I think that Gavin Newsom could really jeopardize his future because his job as governor, he was terrible. His job in San Francisco is terrible. His best thing is he looks the part and he's a very talented speaker. And DeSantis, if he does his homework, he's got a much stronger hand.
Well, Brian, I have a source that could potentially be moderating this event.
Oh, okay.
And that source told me that he's going to be fair, and he wants both of them to defend their record, right?
What we want.
That this is going to be about how well California is and how well Florida has governed themselves. But he's going to lean on the candidates to make that case for him. And that's where the questions are going to be.
And if they want to fight back and forth and explain their records and question each other's records, then they can.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It is hard, especially if you're conservative, to look at Gavin Newsom and say, you could say, yeah, he's central casting. He looks like a presidential candidate. But when you look at, like you always say, when you flip over the baseball card, when you look at his resume and his track record and what's happening in California, it's hard to defend that. But look at our country, y'all. 50% of our country, it's basically 50-50.
Yeah.
We don't understand it. You're right. You might not understand it. But
I looked at the polling for California versus the polling for Florida, and Ron DeSantis and Gavin Newsom essentially have the same poll numbers in each of their respective states.
Isn't that crazy? When you see everyone
if you're living in
California,
you love California, so you're going to love your local politician.
Well, the thing is, he was doing so terrible. They recalled him. He fought it off, but they recalled him. The other thing is he knocked over Chinese children, and I think that should disqualify him in China. Remember playing basketball? The problem is, here's the problem. This is one thing I wanted to ask. This is going to be Sean's challenge. Or if Gavin Newsom says things and it's not right, and Governor DeSantis says things and it's not right, what is the role of someone to go, what are you talking about? Your homeless situation is not X, Y, and Z. No. Right. Your GDP is not there. So you have to, if you are a candidate, and Ron DeSantis is really, really bright, you have to go, no. You have to know the California stats and the Florida stats, and you have to be your own fact checker of your opponent. Whose job is that?
Or is that if Gavin Newsom says something that's incorrect, is it DeSantis' job?
It looks like it's going to be DeSantis' job.
Ultimately, is Sean Hannity going to be the moderator or the fact checker? I think he's
going to let them duke it out.
There's anyone,
right, exactly. I think he's got to be the moderator.
Yeah, I think so too. But if there's anyone who does know the facts, it's Sean. You could ask him any question.
You just got to be careful with Newsom, though, because he's smooth. He's wrong, but smooth with it. Well, and a lot of people buy into the personality sometimes instead of the policy.
I think this is going to be one of the top 5 TV must-see things of this year.
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm going to be there.
Exactly. That's my transition.
No way.
And we never do this.
What are you doing?
Because I'm going to do a diner there tomorrow and Friday in Georgia.
Oh, we never do the dual.
We never do dual. We like to spread out the love, and we don't like doing back-to-back in the same
Have I signed off on this?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I
mean, what is going on? I mean, you're 2 days in a row?
I know. Because
what the hell?
You're the face of the show.
What kind of budget do you think we have?
Yeah. Right. Someone's going to get fired.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's reprimanded. Right. How about that? I don't really want it's near the holidays.
All right. So the big show, 90 minutes tomorrow night. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.